Okay, this is part 3 of the overview of special education. Again, my name is Dr. George Giuliani from Hofstra University, and our topic now is the discussion of prevalence in special education. Now, when we talk about the word prevalence, we're really talking about how common something is. How common is something? And prevalence in special education refers to the total number of individuals with a particular disability currently existing in the population at a given time. And prevalence is often expressed not just in total numbers, but also in percentages. So when we're talking about the prevalence of children with disabilities, we're talking about not just the number of children who have them, but also the percentage of children who have them. And first, looking from the big picture, working our way down, according to the U.S. Department of Education's latest data on prevalence of students in special ed, there are approximately 6.7 million students in the United States that receive special education services between the ages of 3 and 21 years of age. Again, 6.7 million U.S. students between 3 and 21 years of age receive special education services. Now, just two things to note there. First, we'll get to the birth up to the age of 3 piece. And second, you'll notice it's 3 up to the age of 21. But be aware, upon graduation from high school, IDEA no longer applies to you. Okay, so when we think of someone who graduates from high school who was receiving special ed services and now is in college, IDEA does not cover that individual. But the law covers 3 up to the age of 21 because there are many students who don't graduate from high school or who don't graduate at 18, 19, 20 years old, etc. So understand that there are 6.7 million students between 3 and 21 years of age receiving special ed services in the United States, but upon graduation from high school, you no longer fall under IDEA. Now, when we look at prevalence, let's talk about the 13 different disability classifications. As of the making of this video, there are 13 different disability classifications. However, 5 of them make up 85% of all the students in special education. Learning disabilities, speech and language impairments, other health impairments, intellectual disabilities, and emotional disturbance, those 5 are what we call the Big 5, because those 5 disabilities make up 85% of all the children receiving special education services today. Learning disabilities is at the top at 39%. 39% of all students receiving special education services have on their IEPs the classification of a learning disability. This is followed by speech and language impairments, and then next it's followed by other health impairments. Now you might think, why would other health impairment be third on the list? Health impairments are things like asthma, allergies, or anything that's health related. Well, the reason why OHI, other health impairments, is number 3 on the list is because attention deficit disorder or attention deficit with hyperactivity disorder, ADD or ADHD, is considered a neurobiological disorder. And as such, children who have ADD or ADHD who are receiving special education services will have the classification of other health impairments on their IEP. Again, this is followed by intellectual disabilities, what we referred to previously as mental retardation, and emotional disturbance. Those 5 disabilities make up 85% of all the students receiving special education in the United States today. The other 15% are developmental delay, autism, and one of the things to note with autism is that the numbers in autism have been rising yearly. So I wouldn't be surprised that over the course of the next few years, if autism doesn't move its way up to the Big 5. That's followed by multiple disabilities, hearing impairments, orthopedic impairments, and then visual impairments, deaf blindness, and traumatic brain injury. Now, when we look at prevalence, one of the things that we'll see is that the number of children receiving special education services in the United States today has grown every single year since we started counting in the 1976-1977 school year. Starting in 1975, we really made a significant change in special education, and we'll talk about that in our next lecture on the history of special ed. But 1975 is a critical year for special education, and we started keeping count of children receiving special ed in 1976. And every year since that time, the national count has grown each year. When we look at the overall numbers, one of the things that we find right away is that children with disabilities receiving special education and related services represent 12% of all children in schools. This means that 12% of all children in school are receiving special education services, which also tells us that 88% of children receive the general education curriculum. So part of the reason why it's special is because only 12% of children receive it. Now, let's talk about gender and special education. One of the things we know in the general population is that males and females are enrolled pretty much in equal proportion in general ed. But in special education, there are about twice as many males as there are females receiving special education. And the question becomes why? Why is this? Well, there are numerous theories as to why there are many more boys receiving special education than girls receiving special ed. And the reason why is because boys tend to exhibit more externalizing behaviors, while girls are more likely to exhibit what we call internalizing behaviors. Now, boys exhibiting externalizing behaviors, what does that mean, externalizing behaviors? Well, externalizing behaviors are behaviors that are directed outward. They're directed towards other people. And these are behaviors that are disruptive to others. They are resulting in considerable disruption in the classroom. So, for example, aggressive behavior, punching at people, swinging, throwing temper tantrums, swearing. All of these things are outward behaviors that disrupt the classroom. And these types of non-compliant behaviors often create difficulty for teachers. Now, internalizing behaviors are behaviors that are directed inward or within the self. Girls are more likely to exhibit internalizing behaviors. And internalizing behaviors don't create what we call chaos in the classroom. Internalizing behaviors are things like worrying, shyness, depression, anxiety. And so although internalizing behaviors can be just as serious as externalizing behaviors because of the long-term potential impact, they don't create problems in the classroom very often. So, the bottom line here is that since research suggests that girls are more likely to exhibit the internalizing behaviors, which are not disruptive, and they don't create any learning process problems in the class, educators may not see these types of behaviors as a serious concern, and girls may not be referred for a referral for special education evaluation as opposed to boys. This will end part 3 of our overview of special education. You can continue now to part 4.